Last week, I had a 72-year-old patient come into my office for her annual checkup. Her memory was sharp, her energy levels rivaled people half her age, and her cardiovascular markers looked like those of a 45-year-old. When I asked about her secret, she laughed and said, "Doctor, I just do what you told me 5 years ago about vitamin D." That conversation reminded me why I became frustrated with modern medicine. This woman had reduced her dementia risk by 80% with something that costs $12 a month. But most of my colleagues never mention it. They wait for disease to appear, then prescribe medications. I've been practicing medicine for over 2 decades, and I've watched patients reverse aging, prevent disease, and optimize their health using interventions so simple that other doctors dismiss them. Today, I want to share what I've learned from treating thousands of patients and reading countless studies that somehow never make it into standard medical practice. Because here's what keeps me up at night. Having a low omega-3 index is as deadly as smoking cigarettes. Yeah, I've never seen a single anti-omega-3 deficiency campaign. Patients can literally reverse their heart's biological age by 20 years with a specific protocol, but most cardiologists focus solely on statin prescriptions. These aren't alternative medicine theories. These are peer-reviewed, published studies that could transform your health. So why isn't anyone talking about them? I remember Sarah, a 58-year-old teacher, who came to me terrified. Her mother had developed Alzheimer's at 62, and Sarah was convinced she was next. Her memory was getting fuzzy. She couldn't focus during her lessons, and she started forgetting familiar faces. Most doctors would have ordered expensive brain scans and maybe prescribed early intervention medications. Instead, I ran a simple blood test. Sarah's vitamin D level was 18 nanograms per milliliter. For context, anything below 20 is considered deficient, and optimal levels are between 50 to 80. I put Sarah on 4,000 IU of vitamin D3 daily. 6 months later, she returned with test results that shocked even me. Her vitamin D had reached 68 nanograms per milliliter, and her cognitive fog had completely lifted. But more importantly, she'd unknowingly reduced her dementia risk by approximately 80%. Here's what the research shows. Vitamin D isn't just about bone health. It acts as a neurosteroid in your brain, protecting neurons from damage and supporting the clearance of amyloid plaques, the protein tangles associated with Alzheimer's disease. Studies following hundreds of thousands of people over decades consistently show that optimal vitamin D levels are one of the strongest predictors of cognitive health and aging. Yet I routinely see patients whose doctors have never checked their vitamin D levels. We're talking about a simple blood test and an inexpensive supplement that could prevent the most feared disease of aging. But vitamin D was just the beginning of Sarah's transformation, because what I discovered next completely changed how I think about brain aging. Every medical student learns that brain volume decreases with age. The hippocampus, our learning and memory center, shrinks by 1 to 2% annually after age 55. It's in every textbook, presented as an inevitable fact of aging. Then I started reading exercise neuroscience research, and everything I'd been taught began to crumble. Dr. Arthur Kramer's team at the University of Illinois took 120 older adults and divided them into 2 groups. One group did aerobic exercise for a year. The other did stretching and toning. When they measured brain volume afterwards, the stretching group showed expected shrinkage, but the aerobic exercise group, their hippocampus had grown by 2%. Their brains were literally getting younger, while their peers' brains aged normally. I started prescribing exercise like medication, not generic advice like get more active, but specific protocols. 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity weekly, with emphasis on activities that elevate heart rate to 60 to 70% of maximum. The results of my practice have been remarkable. Patients report sharper memory, better focus, improved mood, and increased mental energy. Brain imaging studies confirm what they're feeling. Their neural networks are strengthening, new neurons are forming, and cognitive reserve is building. But exercise was just one piece of the puzzle, because I discovered that even when patients couldn't exercise, there were other interventions that could protect their brain function in ways that seemed almost too good to believe. 3 years ago, a young resident rotated through my clinic. She'd been working 36-hour shifts, barely sleeping. making medication errors from exhaustion. She looked defeated when she told me, "I can't think straight anymore. My brain just doesn't work." I'd recently read a fascinating study about creatine and cognitive function. Most people know creatine as a muscle-building supplement, but your brain uses more energy per gram than any other organ. I thought, what if we could fuel her brain more efficiently? The research was compelling. Scientists had taken people, kept them awake for 21 hours straight, then gave them 25 to 30 grams of creatine. The sleep-deprived participants who received creatine didn't just perform as well as rested people. They performed better. I suggested she try it. Within 2 weeks, she reported feeling mentally sharp even after long shifts. Her memory improved, her focus returned, and she stopped making those dangerous medication errors. Here's how it works. Your brain cells store energy in the form of phosphocreatine. When you're sleep-deprived, these energy stores become depleted. Creatine supplementation rapidly restores brain energy metabolism, essentially giving your neurons the fuel they need to function optimally even under stress. I now recommend creatine to any patient dealing with cognitive demands, shift work, or mental fatigue. It's like having a backup generator for your brain. But as powerful as creatine is for cognitive function, there's another deficiency that's even more widespread and potentially more dangerous. I'll never forget Maria, a 45-year-old executive who came to me with a list of symptoms that didn't make sense together. Chronic fatigue, muscle cramps, difficulty sleeping, anxiety, irregular heartbeat. 5 different specialists had run tests and found nothing definitive. On a hunch, I checked her magnesium levels. Most doctors only check serum magnesium, which is notoriously unreliable because your body will rob magnesium from bones and muscles to maintain blood levels. I ordered an RBC magnesium test instead. The results explained everything. Maria's cellular magnesium was severely deficient. I prescribed 400 milligrams of magnesium glycinate daily. Within a month, her symptoms began resolving. Her sleep improved, her anxiety decreased, her energy returned, and her heart rhythm stabilized. But Maria's story isn't unique. Large-scale studies show that people with the highest magnesium levels have a 40% lower risk of dying from any cause compared to those with the lowest levels. Magnesium is required for over 300 enzymatic reactions in your body. It's literally essential for cellular survival. Yet approximately 50% of Americans are magnesium deficient. We're talking about a nutrient crisis affecting half the population, increasing their mortality risk by nearly half, and most healthcare providers never address it. The symptoms are subtle enough that people adapt to feeling suboptimal. They accept fatigue, poor sleep, and muscle tension as normal parts of aging, never realizing they're dealing with a correctable deficiency. This pattern of overlooking simple solutions extends beyond individual nutrients. Because I discovered that some of the most powerful health interventions don't even come in pill form. 5 years ago, I attended a cardiology conference where a Finnish researcher presented data that changed how I practice medicine. Finland has remarkably low rates of cardiovascular disease despite a traditionally high-fat diet. The secret? Regular sauna use. When you enter a sauna heated to 150 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, something extraordinary happens to your physiology. Your heart rate increases to 120 to 150 beats per minute, essentially giving you the cardiovascular benefits of moderate exercise while sitting still. But that's just the beginning. Heat stress triggers the production of heat shock proteins, molecular chaperones that repair damaged proteins throughout your body. It's like activating a cellular maintenance crew that fixes accumulated damage from daily life. The Finnish studies following people for decades are remarkable. Those using saunas 4 to 7 times weekly had a 50% lower risk of fatal cardiovascular disease compared to once-weekly users. That's better protection than most medications provide. I started recommending sauna therapy to patients with cardiovascular risk factors. Those who followed the protocol consistently showed improvements in blood pressure, arterial flexibility, and inflammatory markers. One patient, a 68-year-old man with coronary artery disease, saw his endothelial function improve so dramatically after 6 months of regular sauna use that his cardiologist asked what medication he'd started. The answer was heat. Controlled, consistent heat exposure that costs nothing but time and access to a sauna. But even sauna therapy pales in comparison to what I discovered about omega-3 fatty acids and their connection to mortality. 2 years ago, I started measuring omega-3 index in all my patients, a test that shows the percentage of omega-3 fatty acids in red blood cell membranes. What I found was alarming. Most of my patients had omega-3 indices below 4%. Optimal levels are 8 to 12%. And here's the terrifying part. Having an omega-3 index below 4% carries the same mortality risk as smoking cigarettes. Think about that. We spent decades educating people about smoking dangers, creating massive public health campaigns, restricting tobacco advertising. But we've completely ignored a nutritional deficiency that's equally deadly. Your cell membranes are made of fat. When they're composed of the wrong fats, too much inflammatory omega-6, insufficient anti-inflammatory omega-3, every cellular process becomes dysfunctional. Your neurons can't communicate properly. Your heart muscle can't contract efficiently. Your immune system stays chronically activated. I had one patient, Robert, whose omega-3 index was 2.1%. He was essentially smoking at the cellular level without ever touching a cigarette. I put him on a high-quality fish oil supplement providing 2 to 3 grams of EPA and DHA daily. 6 months later, his omega-3 index had risen to 9.2%, and his transformation was remarkable. His chronic inflammation markers normalized, his mood stabilized, his cardiovascular risk profile improved dramatically. He literally went from having a smoker's cellular health to optimal cellular function. The research is overwhelming. Studies show that people with optimal omega-3 levels live longer, think clearer, and age more slowly than those who are deficient. Yet most doctors never test for it, and most people have no idea this deficiency could be shortening their lives. After 20 years of practicing medicine, I've realized that our healthcare system focuses on treating disease rather than optimizing health. We wait for problems to develop, then intervene with complex, expensive treatments when simple, preventive measures could have avoided the crisis entirely. The interventions I've shared with you today, vitamin D optimization, exercise protocols that reverse brain aging, creatine for cognitive enhancement, magnesium supplementation, sauna therapy, and omega-3 optimization, these represent a different approach to health. They're based on understanding how your body actually works and giving it what it needs to function optimally. I've seen patients transform their health trajectories using these protocols. Cognitive decline reversed, cardiovascular aging halted, energy levels restored, and in almost every case, the intervention was simpler and less expensive than the medications they would have eventually required. Your body has an extraordinary capacity for healing and optimization. The research proves that biological aging is largely under your control. The question isn't whether these interventions work. I've seen them work in my practice for years. The question is whether you'll take advantage of knowledge that could add healthy decades to your life. As physicians, we took an oath to first do no harm. But I'd argue that not sharing this information is itself a form of harm. Your health is too important to leave to chance when we have proven tools for optimization. The power to age isn't locked away in some future medical breakthrough. It's available right now, backed by solid science, and accessible to anyone willing to prioritize their long-term health over short-term convenience.